So I'd just like to take a little, how are you?
Great.
A little survey. How many of you know other women with uterine fibroids? Everybody, huh? Okay. So do you ever talk with them about them?
Yes.
So what's generally said? Just think a minute and just think about many times you've had conversations on uterine fibroids. What is the two most common things that you all wind up focusing on? So everybody just take a minute and I'll just go around and ask.
Surgery.
Okay. That's okay. One of yours is surgery. What else you focus on?
That's one of the things I know.
Right. But each one of y'all like to give me two.
Oh,
Two
two.
things you can do.
Medication.
Surgery and medication. Okay.
Diet. Painful menstrual cycles.
Okay. So,
Surgery and painful menstrual cycles.
okay. Surgery and pain.
Hysterectomy. And probably heavy bleeding. People talk about wanting their lives back. And we also talk about how they can't take it anymore and they'll do anything.
Okay. Okay. Well, uterine fibroids is an extremely interesting disease. And, I think all of us are aware of the fact that women from the age that I've seen from 20 to 55 years old are having problems with this disease. And this disease primarily is affecting African women continentally in Africa, and also in America and United States. England, France, and the energy that we're putting into doing something about it ourselves as a group of African women is just about null and void. Okay? So you would think that out of all the things that we push and market ourselves as African women, why would something like this be one of our greatest campaigns? I know in the city of Detroit we have a group of women called So Sad, and then there's MAD, and then there's a whole bunch of other things, against drunken driving, and we're protecting our sons by getting shot and a lot of other things. But we haven't put forth any program on a national level to deal with this uterine fibroids. And all of you can testify to the fact that they're not happy with surgery, they're not happy and concerned about medication. Okay? So I've been working on this since 1989. We have one of our pioneer here, a support person, Foster Whitten here. And it's been real interesting noticing the response that women have taken. I'm not talking about women now, African women especially, about doing something themselves about this problem. Okay. So let me just go on and let's just take a look at the anatomy, and perhaps we can elucidate why we've been so passive about wanting to do something about this. Ms. Fayez mentioned earlier that she is kind of stymied as to why she can invite 40 physicians here, and she knows all these women with uterine fibroids, but our group is so small. Okay, when you understand uterine fibroid disease, etc., it is a paradox, okay, in many ways. And even though women suffer with this, because of the state of consciousness that creates it, it actually really motivates them from really doing much to really change a condition, unless somebody actually wakes them up and makes them realize what the state of mind is that really brings it about. So let's look again at what a normal uterus is. Okay, and again, we've opened a lady, and this is how the inside the pelvis looks, the uterus, when we've moved all the intestines and everything back. So everybody's familiar with the anatomy. This is actually the womb. It's shaped much like a pear. We have the tubes here, the ovaries. We have the cardinal ligaments here, the round ligaments here that support it. There's a big band of tissue that comes across in front, known as a broad ligament. Then we have the uterosacral ligaments here that support the uterus. So the uterus actually is like a puppet on a string that moves in the pelvis. So when you lay on the side, the uterus moves to the side. You lay backwards, it falls backwards, etc. And that's part of the complication that happens with women when this organ gets fixed because of scar tissue or because of other organs impeding its movement. That's when it causes pain. But this is normally how this looks. Here we have a group of plexes of all the nerve endings that are responsible for giving you the feelings and sensations that you have. It's interesting. There is an area in the center of the brain more so that actually deals with the uterus. And most women, unless they're in pain, do not feel their uterus, even though it's completely covered with a whole network of nerves, as you say. So it's like, why is it that you can close your eyes and you can be aware of where your finger is or your foot, but you don't know where your uterus is at any particular time? Okay, and it is because there has not been a stimulus for you to really begin to know the inside of your body and know that there is a direct connection between the brain and you being able to know what all of your organs are doing all the time, especially the uterus. So not until a woman has pain in the ovaries or pain in the uterus, etc., does she become aware that there's anything there. And normally no organ should cause us discomfort, but every organ's presence should be always known and felt. Okay, does that make sense? So you should be able to, know that your heart is there, your intestines, your liver, all these things. It's just like the muscles in our body. And a good example of that is when I started doing some weightlifting a while back, that I really did not realize that every muscle in my body also had a location in my brain. And if I never thought about the muscle and asked the muscle to do something, then the muscle never did anything, unless it just happened to be automatic because it was being used with another group of muscles. So when the body building instructor I was working with started asking me to flex these muscles, the muscle just looked at me. Nothing happened in my body, and I was like, well, my muscles don't move. And it's like, right, well, the reason why they don't move is because you never talked to them before to ask them to do anything, okay, on a conscious level. And so that part of the brain is very dormant, and the nerves that actually run to that muscle are very, very unused. So when you started actually thinking about it and then actually forcing the muscle to work with a resistance, whether it's a can or with a dumbbell or a weight, then you begin to establish what? Rapport with the muscle. And therefore, pretty soon you can tell the muscle to jump, you can tell the muscle to stay contracted indefinitely, you can make it ripple, and that's what they do. But all other areas on their brain that deal with all these different muscles, by the time they get to a show, etc., they're in complete command and communication with. So you can establish that kind of rapport and communication, not only with a muscle, just like you can your hand to write or your foot to walk, but also every organ in your body. So those individuals who decided to have rapport with their heart, they can slow their heart rate down to basically nothing indefinitely, and it doesn't bother them. They can stop breathing, breathe, once or twice a minute, etc. No problems, but it's because they actually have a conscious rapport with that. Now, the unconscious mind is always busy telling the body what we are thinking and really feel all the time. But because most of us are very preoccupied with what we're doing on a conscious level, we really are not accountable for what we are doing on an unconscious level. So they talk about the fact that this is a left brain society. The left brain is responsible for collecting data and processing activities on a continuous, rhythmic, repetitive basis. The subconscious mind is aware of everything that's going on. It actually knows that it can hear the hum of this machine, that the door just opened, that somebody just came in, etc., even though you think that you are just completely looking at me and listening to what I'm saying. So it is when we are still taking in all this information and processing it, but not having a communication between the right and left brain, that we start having things happen in our life, things happen in our body that we all of a sudden say that we aren't responsible for. It is not true. Okay, these events, whether they're physical or whether they're in our outer lives, are representations of information that we have collected that we perhaps in fleeting or just in a whimsical manner have made decisions about that are now actually having enough magnetism where they're actually being drawn into our presence. So let's just, anytime we look at the issue that we're talking about today, which is fibroids. And this is how a fibroid uterus looks. So if you remember, we had a nice smooth pair, and now this pair is quite distorted with all of these collections of what we call fibroid tumors. And we have found that these fibroid tumors are adulterated, smooth muscle uterine cells. The uterus is a muscle, but it's a particular type of muscle. It's a smooth muscle. And when we actually take biopsies of this and look at it under the microscope, which is up here, okay, the muscles have become very, very distorted and are storing within them excessive amounts of protein and fat. So it has not been understood yet as to why this protein and fat becomes lobulated and concentrated in different areas of the uterus, but we have been able to identify that there's different types. So there's types that are on the outer surface of the uterus, which are called subserosa. They can actually become so large that they actually become pedunculated on their own stalk, which is what we call them a pedunculated subserosal fibroid. And these can be quite dangerous because if that stalk twists, it creates a tremendous amount of discomfort because in that stalk is the major blood supply and nerve supply to that fibroid. And so when it twists on itself, the blood no longer goes to the large fibroid and the nerve also dies. And it's the dying of the nerve and the dying of the tissue because no oxygen or nutrients are further going to it that actually causes the pain. And so many times this can cause so much discomfort that it presents like an ectopic pregnancy, and these women have to have emergency surgery. And it is because they have this fibroid that is what we call necrosing or dying. We also have these kind of problems where we have pedunculated submucosal fibroids that actually are covered with endometrium. And these things just bleed and bleed and bleed and bleed. And they can actually fall out through the cervix and cause just a lot of problems, fullness, vaginal pain, profuse bleeding, and these can actually cause a woman to lose 2 to 3 pints of blood in no time. Okay. We also have the submucosal fibroids that are right on the inside of the endometrium, and these also cause a lot of bleeding here. Very, very dangerous. So normally most women have the subserous and also the intramural fibroids, but are not really a problem here. But when they become pedunculated, either subserosal or submucosal, and this is when we can get into a lot of problems with head again. Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible to have successful surgery to remove this kind of growth?
The pedunculators are snap. I mean, just put a ligature here, okay, which is a suture. You just tie it off real well, and it's gone. Okay. These become much more of a problem when they're this embedded in the uterus. And the interstitial fibroids are really never treated that way. Okay, usually they would use a drug. Because what happens is the technique that is normally used is a V, or what we call a wedge incision. Okay, because this tissue is very rubbery, okay, but sutures don't hold it. So if you try to actually put a suture in that and tie it, it'll usually tear out. And then it start bleeding and bruising, and so the woman can actually die from internal bleeding. So you have to make sure that you cut this area out with a wide enough margin that there's supposedly healthy uterine tissue. And then you've got to then bring, that's why you cut it in a wedge, so that you can bring the two natural tissues together and sew it closed. But you have to remember that this is a muscle, and muscle is very rubbery and hard to pull together like that. So if it's a really big fibroid like this, you know, you cause a tremendous deformity to happen in the wall of that uterus. And so some can be removed and some can't. It depends on the location. Okay. And so when I say some can be removed and some can't, we're talking about the external artificial means. Okay. All of these can be removed naturally. Okay. That's very important to understand. If you want complete eradication of this, with no bleeding and opening in your uterus and that kind of thing, then you gotta do this from within. Yes.
This one that's protruding into the vaginal canal,
Yes.
is that the same as a polyp? Is that the same as a polyp or what?
Yes, but the polyps can form for different reasons. This is a fibrotic fibroid polyp, as opposed to a polyp that's just full of soft, mucousy tissue. Because when you touch this, this is soft on the outside, but it's rock hard. Okay. And here we have where a fibroid has got so big that it's undergone what we call cystic degeneration. So that's to say that it's gotten so large that it's grown beyond its blood supply, and there's not enough oxygen and nutrients going to that tissue, so it starts dying from within. This will also cause a lot of pain, okay? And if something like this actually happens to rupture or leak out into the abdominal cavity, it can also be quite poisonous, okay? Now here we have something very interesting that happens to quite a few women. This is actually the lumbar and sacral area of the spine, the tailbone here. And here we have a uterus, as you can see, with two little fibroids, and then there's a huge fibroid in the back. Now, this is the bladder with its urethra, which is the exit, how the urine gets out. This is the uterus and its vagina, and then this is the rectum. Now you can see that this person has serious problems with waste retention, okay, because there's no way that they are having normal bowel movements at all with this uterus actually laying right on the tailbone like this. There's a lot of pain there, etc., and obviously when there's too much of what we call an impaction, that will occur, and that's where all of the stool is actually going to build up to the extent of trying to get out. It's going to be pushing down because the intestines are going to be contracting. It's going to be hitting on this fibroid, which is going to be causing a lot of more problems. So a lot of women that have those posterior fibroids will complain of severe pain in the lower back area, serious problems with constipation, etc. So here we have some cases where these women have managed to get pregnant and the fibroids are preventing the delivery of the baby, okay? And so here we have one especially where this baby will not be delivered through the vaginal opening, which is here, because when the baby descends down into the pelvis, and this baby already is what we call too high to be a normal delivery, because normally the baby should have already been down here in the pelvis, in the inlet, which is this fold and the sacral bone. You see there's a huge fibroid that's occupying the whole area where the baby's head is supposed to be. So this lady will labor and labor and labor and labor, and this baby was not going to come through there. Okay, so this is definitely a cesarean section here. Okay. Same thing with this, because you can see here that as this baby is causing the cervix, which is right here, to dilate, okay, she might have some post-operative trauma if there's enough room for the baby to get through, because so much of the cervix is fibroid. So this can actually cause a lot of problems. We have one extreme example here of a large fibroid with a little baby in it. I had the opportunity of having a case like this, and there were just different parts of the uterus. So we had to actually find the parts when we had to do the C-section as to where the baby was so that we can remove the baby. The baby was 2 pounds and the fibroid was 12. Okay. And because, you know, her uterus had so many fibroids, plus a great big huge one, there was no way that this baby was going to have a normal delivery. So she had to have what we call a cesarean hysterectomy. So here's some examples on how, on very rare occasion, they can turn into, we don't have any cancers here. They can, on occasion, turn into cancers, leiomyosarcoma. This is a fibroid that's become completely calcified. This is hard as a rock. You know, when fibroids do become calcified, they take 2 to 3 times longer to dissolve because you have to, first of all, soften them up before you can shrink them. Okay. Here we have a case where this fibroid has been pedunculated. It's a submucosal fibroid, and it's also twisted on itself. Okay, so therefore it's actually rotting inside the womb. Okay, so this lady's having, all kind of very foul-smelling, bloody discharge as this disintegrating fibroid is being released out of her uterus. Okay, now this sets her up for infection. This is dangerous because this is ideal food that bacteria would grow on. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
How do you know what stage the fibroids are in? And what kind of testing is done to make that determination?
Well, we don't necessarily think of stages, we think of degree. Okay, if you have small ones, okay, if they're calcified, okay, and then we look at the location where they are. So ultrasound can normally help a lot, and then just a pelvic exam, okay, because you can feel the ones that are subserosal because they're on the outside area of the uterus, okay. The ones that are actually like this, you can't detect those unless there is an ultrasound done or if somebody's daring enough to do a D&C where they'll actually feel the roughness on the inside with the curette. Okay. So here we have a case where this lady's fibroid has actually turned her uterus inside out. Okay, this fibroid got so big and so heavy because it was like this one. And it got so heavy that it just actually pulled the whole uterus and turned it inside out. That's why you see the ovary and the tube now looking like it's inside the womb. Okay, so we call that an inversion. Okay. So the inversion of the uterus is the prolapse of the submucosal fibroid that got so big. So the uterus spazzing on it, actually trying to evict it itself, it actually pushed it out, and the weight of it actually pulled the uterus inside out. And that's very dangerous, and that has to be corrected. So many times these fibroids also can be so large that they can cause deformities if the mother does get deformed, because these fibroids can cause cells, because normally the cells in the embryo migrate. Okay, that's why it's a direct connection between the hands and the feet, okay, the inside and outside the body. And when the path that these cells should actually migrate is interrupted, then they just stop and they'll actually start growing wherever they're interrupted. So sometimes we've actually seen where arms are displaced or an ear can be actually far lower than another one because these cells were actually interrupted in their normal migratory pattern, and they can cause deformities. Sometimes arms will actually be crooked. The bone will actually form crooked because it's been around this fibroid for so long, and it'll actually just compensate and just move right on around it. Okay.
Can we treat fibroid with the mother pregnant?
No. It's too late then. That's why I always recommend that when you have fibroids, that they should spend the time first creating a healthy body for themselves so they can have healthy children. Okay. Because my understanding of how life works in the universe is that if the child is born to a mother who has fibroids, the child is coming here with karma to work off, because that is not a wholesome environment to be born in. It's like, being in a dirty labor room. And you gotta just lay there and just labor in the dirty labor room. I mean, the person has earned this. It's not the most ideal circumstance to be born in.
Things that cause you to have an inverted uterus?
I beg your pardon?
To having fibroids would cause you to have it?
It's possible depending upon the location and the size of it inside the uterus, yes. Okay. So most fibroids are on the outer surface of the uterus or within the muscle wall. Okay, it's not common for them to be inside the uterus, because when they are, those cause the most problems. Okay. So again, here is a cancer in a fibroid. Okay. And that's why we're always looking very closely at women who have very, very large fibroids, where they look 5, 6, 7 months pregnant, because in that fibroid can also be a cancer that's growing. Okay. Again, here we have had a fibroid uterus that has totally become cancerous. So this is a different issue. Okay. Here's the cervix, and now we have actually a prolapse cancer. Now this may or may not be associated with the fibroid, but they will look kind of similar. And this is actually where we have a whole cancer now involving the whole posterior wall of the vagina. So, after treating a fibroid in many, many different ways, surgery, doing absolutely nothing, working with minerals and vitamins, working with diet, and then finally realizing that fibroids was a state of consciousness, and then working with the state of consciousness of the woman. It was only after we actually worked with the woman's state of consciousness that it allowed her to be a free agent and be totally in control of her own body and to rid the fibroids permanently. Okay, everything else that we tried except hysterectomy is only palliative. That's why when you have the fibroids cut off by laser, etc., they will tell you that they will come back. If you're taking minerals and vitamins for them, etc., once you decide to stop taking the minerals and vitamins, they will come back. If you're taking herbs for them, etc., once you stop taking the herbs, they will come back. If you're eating a particular diet for them that has helped control them and shrink them, and you go on vacation, etc., you forget your diet, they will come back. So the question in my mind then is that everything appears to enslave the woman to something, either vitamin pills or diet, herbs, pharmaceutical drugs, or repeated surgeries. Why? And it finally dawned on me that there had to be some agent from within that was constantly there that would provoke this growth unless something was suppressing it. What was the something? And that's when we started looking at the fact that women who thought alike had similar diseases. And that when we began to find out that the mind is not just something, that there's a direct relationship with the chemistry of the body and what's in the mind, that Dee began to realize that as long as these women have particular states of consciousness, they will make a blood chemistry that will always support the growth of uterine fibroids. So how does that work? Well, this is a woman in her mind, okay? And for those of you who were here yesterday, I talked about the fact that everything is light. There's nothing that's really solid. And the most solidified aspect of ourselves is our physical body. We have 4 other bodies, which is the emotional body, the mental body, the spiritual body, and the soul body. For most of us, we have not allowed ourselves to use that part of the brain that would allow us to see all aspects of ourselves. We have the capacity to see all 5 bodies, but most people do not allow their brains to become activated at that extent. So for those few people who can see them, they are called clairvoyants. But clairvoyance and clairaudience and clairsentience is all part of our supernatural sensory capacity. Okay, it's not something just for some people. We all have the capacity. But if you don't think you have the capacity, then you can never activate that part of the brain. Just because you decide that you can't, you don't do that. Okay? So the mind field is a field of energy. The best description of it that we can capture on a physical level is like a cloud. And depending upon the power and the amount of energy that one contains in their mind field depends on how distant it can travel. You can develop the radiations, the light protons in the mind field to be universal all over the world. So there are people who are able to communicate with people on the planet wherever they are just by thinking. Okay, but it takes a certain amount of discipline, and there's certain meditations you can do that will give you that ability. So you don't have to spend time writing and calling. You can think about them and ask them to call you, or if they're in the vicinity, to manifest, and they will. And they will come and tell you, oh, isn't that something I was just thinking about? So, you know, it's because of the relay. So the mind is extensive. Understanding this, we all are always in our mind. You have a wonderful organ inside the physical body known as the brain and the spinal column. And the brain does wonderful things because it is the master alchemical instrument that can take high frequency vibrations and slow them down to the degree that they will appear physical. So that is to say that anything that is in the mind field, the brain will actually slow down those thoughts until they actually become liquid, and by that being secreted into the bloodstream, because 30% of your blood volume is always in the brain all the time, through the nerves and into the cerebral spinal fluid. That is how all the cells in your body know what you are thinking all of the time, even when you don't know that you're thinking. Okay? And what do I mean by the fact that you don't know what you're thinking? You do this quite frequently. If you have finally learned a path to your job and back, whether it be taking a bus or actually driving, once you have trained your body and told your body what you're supposed to be doing, you can put yourself, should I say, you can give yourself a command, I'm going home now, and whatever vehicle of transportation you're going to use, put yourself on it or in it, and your body will get you home. Now, how many times have you done that and realized that from the time you shut your car door or got on the bus that you didn't even know where you were because your mind was off someplace else? All you knew is that all of a sudden you were just provoked to get off or either stop the car, and you realized that you were at home. But if you had to actually account for getting home, that I stopped at the stop sign, stopped at the stoplights, did all these different things, you would realize that you did not know any of that was happening. And that is because that other side of your brain, the right brain, was actually doing all the work for you while you were in the left brain being real busy. Okay, so that's what I'm saying, is that the brain is constantly processing all thoughts, whether you're conscious of them or not, and making them a chemical reality in the body. So, belief systems that you have, values that you have, thoughts that you have, are all chemical realities in your body. So the three main components, once the nerve cells in the brain have made this substance of reality, I call neurotransmitters ETAs, or evolutionary transformational agents, because whatever this substance is that's made by the types of thoughts that you are entertaining in your mind field will transform your body instantly. So they're just more to me than just a neurotransmitter. That doesn't say much about them. They are evolutionary transformational agents. So the evolutionary transformational agents or neurotransmitters have a direct relationship with the blood and with the nervous system. And so it is through the nervous system and the blood cells in your body. So it is through the blood cells and the nerve cells in your body that transports evolutionary transformational agents to every cell in the body. Okay, so I just kind of made a caricature here of Miss Red Blood Cell and Mr. Nerve Cell so that you can actually begin to get familiar with these parts of your body. So, here we have the evolutionary transformational agent of thought is actually being accompanied by the nerve cell and by Miss Red Blood Cell to a particular point in the body relative to what the thought was about. So thought was having something to do with your hands, and even though all cells in the body will receive evolutionary transformational agent, it is only going to be immediately manifested in the hand, because it's going to be the hand that is going to be sensitized to perform whatever the act is that the neurotransmitter ETA is carrying. Does that make sense? Okay, it's very important that you understand that. Every cell in the body will know that you made a command and made a request of your hand, but it is only going to be the tissues of the hand that are going to respond to that chemical. This lady happened to have a thought about her uterus. And so therefore, Miss Red Blood Cell directly accompanied this evolutionary transformational agent or thought to the uterus. And so I intentionally asked my artist to diagram the fact that every cell in the uterus is a uterus of itself. That's very important to understand, is that every cell in the uterus is a complete uterus and has all the memory, all the function, and all the capacity of the entire uterus. And because they are all the same, they all work together for a bigger job, a bigger activity. Okay? Now, let's look at more detail what happens in the nerve cells. Inside the nerve cells and in all cells, there is a center area of function. Every cell in the body has its own command center. So if you can look at every cell like a personal computer, a PC, it functions basically the same way, except our PCs are much more primitive than the PCs of the cells of the human body. We call it the nucleus. And in every cell, especially the nerve cell, there's a nucleus there that is responsible for making the neurotransmitters or the evolutionary transformational agents. So in the nucleus of the cell, there's something known as cell intelligence. And cell intelligence is actually encoded upon the genetic structure of all cells. And the genes, which are contained on larger structures known as chromosomes, are in every nucleus of every cell in our body, except the red blood cells. So that means that every cell in your body knows who you are, contains 7 generations of your mother and father's side of the family, and has the capacity to function on many different levels. So you call the center of the cell cell intelligence, and it is a computer system. So what happens is that the nerve cell or the blood cell, this red blood cell, will actually carry evolutionary transformational agent to the cell membrane. The cell membrane will let this evolutionary transformational in, and it will go directly to the center of the cell, known as the nucleus of the cell, where it then will present itself, and the center of the cell, being the nucleus, then will process this evolutionary transformational agent against the information that it already contains from the genes. This is a genetic interaction. So most people only think about the fact that their genes are only active when they reproduce. They are continuously acting all of the time to process all the data chemically that happens in the body. So cell intelligence will then take the order, because a thought is software. Okay, we'll actually put it into the database of the computer and we'll process it. And if that thought can be processed, the cell of the body chemically has been made aware of, because all information is stored in the genes in a chemical coding, then that thought will be accepted. And the terminals from the nucleus are actually the blood supply, the nerve system, the venous, and the arterial blood. So our computers look at this as being cables, but in our human body, these are actually blood vessels, lymphatics, arterial system, venous system. And then the nucleus will then let this information, code it now at a level that the cell can understand, to actually move throughout all of the ultracellular structure of the body, so that every cell knows what you're thinking. So therefore, the order's been accepted and the evolutionary transformational agent has been processed. And then that's when you begin to get a change in body structure or function or activity. And this happens in nanoseconds. It happens so fast it's not even thought about. But this happens every time you blink your eye, you walk, you stand, you sit, you eat, everything that you do. Now, we have something that happens very interestingly. We inherit behavior patterns, belief systems, and values from our ancestors. So they've discovered that on the DNA. So everybody comes here already encoded with cultural beliefs, behavioral patterns, etc. That's why children can actually demonstrate behavior of relatives they've never met. Okay, we already come encoded, so the idea that somebody doesn't know how to behave or act is ridiculous. Okay, so when we talk about the mind, it's very interesting because it is a pyramid. The mind's content is based upon hereditary influences, education and experience, and the home environment. Those are the 3 parameters that the mind is actually built on. And when you think about it, it's wonderful, because if there are things that you've inherited that you want to change, you can change them through 2 other parameters. There's nothing you can do about changing what you have inherited. But by exposing yourself to a different experience and gaining different information, and obviously changing the environment that you live in to make sure that it is not the same of the ancestor that you do not care to continue that behavior, that particular information will be repressed and will not be able to exhibit itself this lifetime. That's why it's so incredible to me when I keep hearing about these genetic diseases that people think that they're stuck with. And they don't realize that they can change the environment that is different from the ancestor that passed down that trait. They can change dietary habits, they can change environmental circumstances, and these people don't have to have the same manifestation of that disease because the gene is repressed. It's just that simple. I think a gentleman that has done fabulous research with that, his name is Barry Kaufman, and he wrote a book, Happiness is a Choice. And in this book, that's all he does is talk about all the phenomenal experiences that he's had with children who've been artistic, emotionally traumatized children, all kind of children that supposedly are supposed to be doomed this lifetime. As a matter of fact, one of his children was born artistic and graduated magna cum laude. Now, see, these kids aren't supposed to learn how to read or write or do anything because they're supposed to be totally off in somewhere other than this dimension. But he distinctly describes exactly what he did to be able to break that whole pattern and to give that child a different environment and to learn a different means of communication so that he could actually bring this child into this dimension. But he was working with that pyramid of how the mind is structured. So, here we have a foreign belief system. And this belief system is foreign only because in this person's data bank, none of their ancestors or this individual has ever thought about this thought before. So this is given to the intelligence of the nuclei of the cell, and the body is always primed to try to do whatever you ask of it. But we're having some problems here because as the central intelligence or cell intelligence is checking this against all the information that's in all the software that is in all the genetic code of the individual, it doesn't know how to translate this so that the cells can respond to this automatically and with ease. And so you can see that they're both sweating here. They're trying to figure out what they can do to get this process. So the body will code new thoughts and belief systems in the best way that it can. However, it's not promised what the action is going to be, but the body will attempt it. So this is just like a person taking piano lessons. There's no history ever of a person playing piano in your family. This is just something that you decided that you wanted to do. This is exactly how it's processed. And so therefore, the sense that we have of insecurity, lack of assuredness of being able to complete this act, etc., is a real chemical reality because the body's telling you that this is not anything that we chemically are aware of and we don't know how it's going to work. So there's an ETA that's made to that because everything has to be translated chemically, but it's a different type. Okay? So no promises are made as to how the cell is going to function with this. So for example, in this case, this woman has been thinking about some different values and activities with her uterus that the cells are not familiar with. But the ETA is taken to the uterus, and the uterus is given a new program, and the cells of the uterus don't like it. But because they are basically asked to continuously deal with these thoughts, there is actually an interaction that happens between the uterus and these new thought patterns. And it's one that is relatively stressful. It's not a smooth interaction at all. And so, in my experience, if a woman is entertaining beliefs and values that are definitely alien to her genetic makeup and what she is actually created to do and to function as, it actually causes the tissue to take on an aberrant structure. So this happens to be a uterus that now, in the attempts of trying to actualize these new commands, has become ill. It has a uterine fibroid on its head. So that's the first fibroid. This is a reaction that this uterus is expressing toward these thoughts and values. And so therefore all the cells in the uterus all have little fibroids. Because we have to understand that it is actually a generalized condition that will manifest specifically in certain cells of the body, but all cells are affected. And it's like, for yes.
Does it matter if the message is healthy for the cell or not? Is there some judgment made, or does it affect it differently according to whether it's detrimental or helpful?
Right. Because we're finding out that genetic encoding has all types of different levels of information, okay? And depending upon the purpose of that organism, there's always what we call the creative genetic structure that cell is always, or that organism is always supposed to function under. They have other programs to be able to make adaptations based on environment, that kind of thing, etc. But there's a basic genetic encoding that you can never go against. Okay, and at that point, if there are thoughts that you might have or activities that you want to perform that are alien to what you are structurally created to do, then your body will always show that in dis-ease.
Can you break that down by example?
Well, for example, it's just like trying to make birds just walk instead of fly. I mean, they were created to fly. I mean, walking is something that they do intermittently between flying, but I mean, birds are not supposed to walk for any distance. That's why their feet aren't structured for that. Do you understand what I'm saying? And if they basically try to take on that kind of behavior, not only is it going to destroy the feet, but also a lot of other deleterious things are going to happen. Okay, yes ma'am.
It also, the question is, would this not also include having to suppress basic feelings and emotions that we have as women because of the environment that we might be in, such as working, being in the corporate scene, and the fact that to be an emotional female in the corporate scene is truly a no-no because that's not how it is structured. And because we find ourselves in those environments, we find that we have to leave a very big part of who we are on the doorstep in order to go in to compete, to have the positions.
See, but the key here is that out of all other organisms on the planet, we don't know what human beings cannot do yet. Okay, we do not know what the limitation is of human beings. Okay, so the key here is that you cannot take on a belief system that is alien to what you've been created to do, but you can get the same results. So that's to say that if you are supposed to be in a corporate structure, if the corporation itself has belief systems that are not in your best interest, okay, that means that basically in that corporate structure, you have to function with a different belief system within the structure to be able to stay there. Do you understand what I'm saying? And that might mean that the corporation that you are supposed to be in is one that you have to create. Okay, because if the belief systems are so interwoven in that corporate system that totally are alien to your best interests, then there's no way that you can get through there and be functional, okay, without self-destruction. But that doesn't mean that you're not supposed to necessarily function in a corporation. It just means that then you're supposed to actually form a corporation, but that is structured on values and principles and interactions that are not destructive to you. Okay, and that's the key. So we'll talk about why purpose is so important and then understanding the need to create a buffer system. Okay, because it's when you can create a buffer system, and we looked at these things genetically, that allow you to be in what appears to be a foreign space, but when you understand the importance of environment and exposure, experience, that you can still keep the space relative to your own existence. And the immigrants that have come to this country are very good examples of that. They did some studies with the Japanese, for example, who came here. And they looked at the Japanese in California, and they looked at the Japanese in Hawaii. And they did studies in relationship to their level of health once they left their native country. And they noticed that the level of health for the Japanese in California was actually statistically coinciding with that of Caucasians as far as cancers and digestive disorders, psychosomatic illnesses, etc. As opposed to when they looked at the Japanese in Hawaii, they had none of those type of diseases or problems. So the question was, well, why? And, you know, Hawaii is supposed to be part of the United States. And the key was that when they looked at the lifestyles, the Japanese in Hawaii were basically in Japan, in Hawaii. So what they did is that, you know, they decided consciously what part of American lifestyle and structure we are going to involve ourselves in. And they said, we're having businesses here, so that means we either have to buy the land or lease it, so we will pay the rent or the mortgage. We understand that they have a law where we have to pay taxes, so we report our taxes. You understand what I'm saying? But they then decided how the internal structure of that business and their family was going to be structured. So they did not try to become Christians or Catholics. They stayed Buddhists, okay, or Shinto. They basically ran their household the same way, and their houses looked just like they would in Japan as much as possible. They brought all of their relics and artwork, etc. Okay. They continued to eat the foods that they normally would eat in Japan. They continued their religious ceremonies, etc., as they did in Japan, etc. The only thing is that they just got up in the morning and went to their business and did what they did and paid their taxes and sold what they sold and went home. But as far as having aborted all of their cultural activities, their ceremonial activities, their diet, their way of dressing in their home and how to raise their children, they did not do that. As opposed to the Californian Japanese who did, where they started eating hamburgers and just all kind of things and, you know, that kind of thing, they began to encroach on the same ailments. So we're finding out more and more about what happens when one does not honor one's genetic makeup. So let's move on. I want to talk about something that's very interesting. Now, when I began to read more about the psychological effect of thoughts chemically on the body, I started asking questions to African women about their reproduction, their sexual activities, etc., that had uterine fibroids. And it was very interesting to note that they had some very different value systems. So, what I began to look at, there's a gentleman in Washington, D.C. who's done a lot of study with axologies, and axologies is the cultural values of a group of people. So Eurocentrically and Afrocentrically, there are some very interesting values that are quite different. And you have to remember that a value is a chemical reality in the body because it's something that a person decides they're going to live their life by. That's what culture is. Culture is an agreement between a group of people who say these are the laws as to how we're going to live and interact with each other. And if you do this on a day-to-day basis, this becomes a permanent chemical coding in the genes. This is a genetic reality. So, Afrocentrically, abundance is a natural state of being in all things. Eurocentrically is lack and limited supply is a natural state of affairs. Now it's very interesting because when you look at the origin of these two, it's very obvious as to why they would have opposite values and perceptions around their external environment. Okay. Living in Africa where you have light at night and light in the daytime also so intensely, where everything grows so freely, you can spit and everything grows. To think that there's not enough of anything is obviously visually not possible. Okay? There are many areas where, you know, diamonds just are on the street, gold is everywhere. So, I mean, you know, these things would have not ever been considered of any real value because they were just always present and known about. In colder climates where the weather does not allow plant life to grow abundantly, where there's only certain seasons where abundance appears to manifest, even though abundance is always present. So if it happens to be cold, there's abundant coldness, there's abundant ice, there's abundant snow, as opposed to abundant sunshine, perhaps only 3 months out of the year, and abundant plants. It would appear that if you wanted abundant plants and sunshine, but for 6 months out of the year, that's all you're getting is lots of snow and lots of cold, you can define that as lack real easy. Okay, because even though you're in the midst of abundance of something else, it's not what you want. Okay, so based on the definition from the areas of the world where Europeans, Caucasians have descended from, lack and limited supply appears to be a problem, and they're talking about being able to stay warm, to have food freely, animals available, etc. Afrocentrically, the values are our lives are sacred and must prevail at all costs. Where Eurocentric values are my life is sacred and must prevail at all costs. Now, in Africa, because so many other things were basically just status quo, we began to build a value system around people. And so how we interacted with people, who we knew, all these different things was actually a determination of your wealth. Wealth is a reflection of the degree of satisfaction you experience from communicating with family, offspring, and friends. Eurocentrically, however, wealth is the amount of accumulation of an object or objects you're capable of demonstrating. And if you come from an environment that you feel is restrictive, that would limit your food supply, limit your clothing supply, etc., then that is important for you to be able to demonstrate that and to have enough to be able to survive. Men and women are equal. So in our rites of passage activities in Africa, it was expected that all men and all women would be able to take care of themselves and be able to make a relevant contribution to the community. One was not seen as less than the other. They were always identified as having different functions, but everybody was always supposed to be able to take care of themselves. Men are more capable than women. It is the man's responsibility to provide for the woman and the child. Now, research I've done, it's very interesting because in colder climates, it was always felt that the organism that had the most stamina, most muscle mass, etc., that could endure the cold, that could do the heavy lifting, perhaps that could do the hunting, etc., was the person who was responsible for providing the food. So in Eurocentric lifestyle, as to how they lived, the man appeared, because of his body structure, etc., to be able to handle that. And women did the more detailed, more finite work. I do not know what happened within that clan as to why they decided to give a more of a value to men than women. But I guess it's because if you're continuously wondering if you're going to have food to eat, a place to stay, if the man is more capable of providing that, perhaps that's why that was done. The child is the responsibility of the collective community. The child is reared by its parents, but molded specifically to be a member of the community by the extended family. That's why naming activities were so important in Africa, because it was a label. It was a means of being able to tell what family you're from, what your lineage was, if there were any omens that came about during the time that you were carried, or if the season was rainy, or any special attributes of your family that was also encoded in your name, so that when you went throughout the village playing and mingling, when you told your name, everybody immediately understood who you were and what you were about. And see, that automatically set you in line to be supported, to be the best that you could be. Because if you happen to be the griot's son, then when you went to somebody's house and they were going to take you and show you their family relics, you know, and tell you the story about their favorite relative, etc., because it would be suspected, most likely, that you would probably move on into the footsteps of your father. And therefore, you would be responsible for being the historian of the tribe. So therefore, you were raised to do that. I mean, so if a child comes from a metal worker's family, etc., an artist's family, they're not going to sit down and tell him all that. That would not be the best use of his time. You know, if it's destined for him to be an artist, they would be showing him some other things. Do you understand what I'm saying? So your name was very, very important. And it was understood that a child rearing was exposure and experience from the entire community to be able to be a balanced part of that community. That's why we had rites of passage, ceremonies, etc., so that everybody was indoctrinated as to what the policies were of the tribe, the religious rites, those things that were considered taboo, and you were indoctrinated into the practices that allowed the tribe to continue. And that was done on a massive level. And that's why burying the placenta was a sign of that. So that's why after you had your baby, and once the baby's name was given, then the placenta was buried in a formal community ceremony so that that got clear to the parents, and to the community, that the child no longer just belonged to the parents, but also is now part of the community. Okay. Eurocentrically though, the parents are considered to be totally responsible for their child, and it's the parent's responsibility to rear a child who can become a productive member of society. Now, one of the things that's so interesting that we're finding out is another factor that is playing an important part here. This is a cute little bird known as a tit. And this tit learned how to open milk bottles under duress. So this little bird normally lives in Australia in the outbacks. In the outbacks, we have some interesting things that happen in them. And nature has a natural way of keeping them from overrunning the entire country by setting them on fire. So that's a natural way of manicuring. So thousands and thousands of miles of outback will spontaneously go into combustion to burn. And when that happens, then the animals have to migrate either before it or after it to a new territory until the fire dies out, and then it'll actually seed itself and then grow. Okay? So these birds were pushed out of their normal habitat by fire. And so they were pushed into the cities, and because the bugs and worms that they normally were to eat were now basically unavailable, they had to learn how to do something different. So they learned how to basically open milk bottles and drink the milk out of the bottles. Now, what was so interesting about this phenomenon, though, is that these are little birds too, is that they noticed that when this first started occurring, this happened way up here in 1935, where there were different outbreaks of it being recorded that these birds were now opening the milk bottles. From 1935 to 41, all the way to 1947, this is a tremendous amount of territory that these little birds did not cover, where they were to be able to identify all throughout the country that all the tits had learned how to open milk bottles. So the question was, how did they all learn? Okay. And so now we have discovered a very interesting phenomenon that happens between like species. And we see that all the time. And it is called morphic resonance, or causative, formative causation. Depends on what physicist you read. But what we have identified is that organisms of the same genetic makeup broadcast to each other their thoughts and what they see. So that if one individual of a like species is thinking or performing a particular behavior, that his or her activity will automatically stimulate the genes of all other species that are alike to do the exact same thing. So this is why birds in a group, a flock of birds, fish in a school, will automatically become one fish or one bird. That's why they normally will fly left or right, they will swim up and down, etc., because they now actually become one bird because they're the same species, same genetic makeup, and they actually broadcast to each other. So, does anybody have any questions on that? Does everybody understand that?
Is that, would that be comparable to us just having regular conversation, sharing ideas?
No.
It's not the same.
No.
This is genetically
Right, it's comparable.
communicated?
That's correct. It's actually broadcasted. It's through the form of radio waves and TV waves. Okay? It's like, for example, in our case, that we have sisters and brothers here who are very culturally African. And so they dress that way, they play drums that way, they've done all these African things. And you ever ask them, have they ever been to the motherland? No. Anybody in their family taught them that? No. So it's like, well, how do you know how to tie your hair like this? And how do you know how to dress like that? Well, why do you know how to play the drum like that? And it is because from whatever tribe this person's descendants are, those that are still left in Africa that are doing that exact same thing automatically transmits that to that individual, and that individual intuitively does that. It is known as causative morphic, we'll just use the term morphic resonance. Morphic means body, resonance means to move or to vibrate. Okay. So if you're interested, there's two gentlemen, Rupert Sheldrake, he uses the term formative causation, that's what I was trying to say earlier, and Fred Allen Wook uses the term morphic resonance. So therefore, what's happened in America is very interesting between us, because we still are continuously receiving a tremendous amount of information from Africa on cultural values and belief systems, etc. And they are receiving a tremendous amount of information from us. So that means that how we think and what we do also we actually transmit to them, which has caused some real interesting observations if you've been observing what's happening in Africa versus what actually we're going and doing here. So just something as simple as the cultural values around hair care, from a Eurocentric value and an Afrocentric value, all these things are actually actually transmitted to our sisters and brothers in Africa. Now, I don't know if you've actually traveled there lately, but it's real interesting to see that more and more African women are artificially straightening their hair. But that's actually what we've actually transmitted to them over there to do that. So it's really interesting how this works. And what happens is that it creates foreign ETA. Because as long as Africans in Africa are doing what they indigenously do, which is part of our genetic memory, and as long as we're in a foreign country that has a different value system, we are being asked to make two, many times, contradictory chemicals in our bodies on particular actions. Okay? And when I talk to women, especially around their reproduction and how they choose mates, they have conflict over that, because the way we choose mates in Africa versus the way mates are chosen in America are really very different. So we're having a real problem here dealing with the foreign ETA that we are making from getting all of this information from Africa and then also from America. Okay. So it actually produces chemical conflict, and it actually produces a chemical war in our bodies. And so therefore we wind up not feeling good, having resistance to ourselves. The reason we don't know why, we're not happy, creates a lot of fears. So, in relationship to a woman that has uterine fibroids, my theory is that she has a dilemma. But also, what's so wonderful is that because everything has front and back, there's also a solution. Okay, because one never comes without the other. Okay, and the key here is to decide what the solution is. Okay, we've all basically agreed that surgery is not an answer, and not one that we want to seriously entertain. We've all agreed that we don't like taking drugs that actually make men out of us, because that's actually what the Lupron does. It totally shuts down ovarian activity, pituitary activity, etc., and therefore the effects of testosterone take over our bodies. So we don't ovulate anymore, we start producing hair, all these different things. It's a lot of problems. So based on what has been identified in the literature over the past 20 years, very clearly that affects change in the body, we've actually created a uterine fibroid home treatment system. And this was very interesting. I thought about this for a long time once it was revealed to me. I do apologize if my little diagrams got a little wet. I thought about this for a very long time because having been trained as a surgeon, my thing is like, oh my God, that's incredible. I mean, now we move from pharmaceutical drugs and from surgery to having a person treat themselves at home. You know, I mean, that's really unheard of. But when you look at what the real cause of the disease is, It's something that basically can never be treated with drugs or surgery anyway, that can be treated in a familiar environment, which is home. Also, I looked at the fact as to how can 1 out of every 3 African women in America, and also 28% of Caucasian women here in America that have fibroids, be treated in an office setting. I mean, with very high quality care. It's impossible. At least I wouldn't want to see it. I mean, because that is millions and millions of women with fibroids. They're doing over 2 million hysterectomies a year now, and 80% of those are melanin-dominant women. So, what were the keys here that needed to be re-established in the minds of women with fibroids? First of all, that this was something that they themselves could control. So they had to learn, again, about the concept of self-mastery. Also, they had to understand that they have contributed to the formation of these fibroids. So it has to be also self-acceptance. Okay, and unfortunately, in this country especially, medicine has really robbed individuals of taking responsibility that they've had much to do with any of the types of diseases that they're facing until recently. I mean, finally, people are beginning to realize that if I smoke, there's a chance that I might be creating a lung cancer for myself or emphysema, or if I'm eating too much fat, that I could possibly cause coronary artery disease, etc. So slowly but surely, people are now taking responsibility for the fact that they are involved in their lives on an everyday basis, and they do contribute to what they experience. Thirdly, is that the woman has to discover, self-discover who and what she is and what her purpose is about. Because we cannot continue to just be here idly carrying out somebody else's dreams and wishes that have nothing to do with what our own commitment to ourselves are. So if we know that we're here to be artists, if we know we're here to be entertainers, if we know we're here to be teachers, if we know we're here to be secretaries or whatever, we cannot continue to work on jobs that are totally alien to that we know that we should be performing. You cannot live a lie every day and think that you're going to have perfect health. It's impossible. Because of the chemical reality that you create. As soon as you have understood in your mind that this is not a place you want to be, you immediately have already told your cells, we are not supposed to be here or do anything that's here. And then you turn around because it's 8 o'clock and jump in a car and go there and then think that everything is supposed to go well at this job for 8 hours a day. It's impossible because you've already told the cells they have no business being involved in this. And money and nothing else can actually reprogram the cells to accept that. It's impossible. So therefore, this agent that everybody just nebulously just throws around known as stress is self-inflicted. It comes from self-deception, from self-dishonesty, from fears and insecurities about doing things and not having enough self-confidence to feel that you can do that you're truly created to do, and be that you truly want to be and love being, and be able to have a high quality life. And thirdly, self-awareness, who you are, how the body functions, how the mind, the emotional body, the mental body, and spiritual body all work. Now, I've used the term a couple of times, spiritual body, and I want to make it clear that the spiritual body is the awareness as to how you are to use your life force energy on a day-to-day basis. It is not a religious conviction. So that is to say that anytime we have a person who is doing something on a day-to-day basis that they already know that they do not want to do, they are not spiritual people. So every time you go to a job knowing that this is not what you want to do, but you're there for money or whatever, know that you have already told your body that you are misusing your life force energy. And you cannot get the highest functioning out of the cells of your body by doing that, because the body doesn't know anything about lying. That is something that it is not programmed to do. This is an illusion that human beings have accepted and forced the body to carry out acts that it knows it has no business to. It will reject it, and it does it by disease. So, therefore, by instructing you on self-mastery, self-acceptance, self-discovery, and self-awareness, and we do that in writing with a manual. We also do that with audio tapes. And by supporting your physical body with a proper diet based on your genetic makeup and heritage, and also with what we call food complements, or what most people call herbs, that have the capacity to eradicate large amounts of waste out of the body, you are able to correct fibroids for yourself. So what happens then is that the foreign evolutionary transformational agents that have totally taken over your body are now on the run, because coming into self-awareness and self-mastery brings about a chemical harmony and peace in the body, because you're on one accord with yourself. So you're now making evolutionary transformational agents that give the cells of the body permission to be all that they were created to be. And that's when you begin to function at a level that you've never known before. All kinds of transformations happen. And therefore, since we're talking about reestablishing harmony in one particular area of the body, then all the little cells in the uterus now are harmonious and happy again. It's just that simple. It really is. This is not a real difficult disease to correct.
As you go through the healing process for that disease, are you also correcting other imbalances?
Many others, that's correct. And so that's one of the greatest gifts that I have found in using this method to approach any disease process, is that it gives you a magic wand to also be able to be immune to all other diseases. Because when you become aware of your own level of self-deception, when you become aware of who you are, when you then begin to embark upon your purpose, you then have a blood chemistry that does not allow anything to exist in it that's not in harmony with you. And so, we know that everything in the universe has already been created. So these little viruses and bacteria have always been here. But why is it all of a sudden that all of these things are attacking people's body? And it is because more and more people are actually living lifestyles based on misperceptions about themselves and are doing things for money or to just get by, as opposed to doing those things that they want to do. And it causes an inhibition in the functioning of the cells where they are not able to manage just day-to-day normal cleansing processes. These bacteria and viruses have been around all the time. You've been inhaling them, eating them, all kinds of things. But because your state of mind creates a chemistry that does not allow the cells to function optimally, they can't handle it, and they manifest a dis-ease activity in the body that you now realize. So this is the goddess. And she was divinely brought to me because it was most important to understand that the woman is a divine entity, a vehicle, a vessel through which all things on this planet manifest. So whether it's a female human or whether it's a female fly, nothing gets here unless it comes through the female energy in this dimension. That is the law. We have all come here to master and to understand life in the dimension of magnetism. This is a magnetic dimension. If you don't have the magnetism, you don't get it here. And that's what you have to understand. Even men who come with electric energy are here to learn the power of magnetism. So, and that's why it's such a hassle for them, because they are asked to actually learn about an opposite energy that is not overtly strong in their bodies. So they have their own electric potential that they have to deal with, and it has to be tempered here in this environment because it can become very destructive, because they're not here to actually destroy, they're here to actually understand magnetism and how magnetism brings atoms together to build, not to destroy. And that whole lesson is still very foreign to most men, but that also is a reflection of what women have not even understood, which is why they haven't impregnated that teaching upon that has come out of their womb, which is other men, because all men are our sons. And I say that not at all in a derogatory way, but in a way of responsibility. That is our responsibility as the source in this dimension to always impregnate everything that comes through us with universal truth. And when you don't know who you are, and when you don't know the universal laws, then therefore whatever comes through you is only going to be imprinted with what it is that you know and you expose them to. So, you know, I have really looked at what has been happening on the planet as why women are literally being trampled. You know, I mean, you know, you go to India, you get set on fire and doused with gasoline. You know, other places you just get your head chopped off. You know, my thing is that, well, what is the deal here? That, you know, there's an anti-woman campaign. But when I realized that the woman in her own ignorance has even aborted and ignored her own function and reason for being and has not understood the divinity of which she is operating, then therefore, because you are only created to operate in a goddess realm, functioning in any other capacity makes you really useless. And the universe does not support anything that does not function in the capacity that it was created to function. Can't do it. So if you decide that you want to be something else other than a goddess, then you have to take whatever's in the environment. And most women have chosen not to operate in the realm of goddessship. So that's why they get doused with fire and they get talked about and raped and beaten and a whole bunch of other things. Because they are not in consciousness where they were created to be. Nothing that is not on purpose gets support from the universe. It's contrary to doing that because everything was created to perpetuate the universe. And if the universe supports anything that is contrary to its own existence, it would bring about its own elimination. And the universe has no intention of killing itself. Because it is 100% love and it can't do that. So it's very, very interesting that this disease has all type of metaphysical and spiritual ramifications, uterine fibroids. Because when I look at societies of insects, especially, where the females do not have their uteruses, they do not have the capacity to create. They can only follow directions and maintain. So you want to study the social insects, you will see that over and over again. It is only the women or the insects with the uteruses that determine the destiny of the hive. And so those that don't have uteruses only maintain what the queens dictate. And as I said last night, as I've observed women that have had hysterectomies, I'm very concerned about them because primarily, first of all, they have never been treated psychologically for the reason why they had the surgery, which means chemically they still have the disease and their cells are still functioning at that level. So if they were misusing their creative energies, if they happen to have hysterectomy because of fibroids, then they're permanently locked in to continue to misuse their creative energies. And so therefore, they are not allowed to create new and greater things. And it's actually a cycle or pattern that you will see the hysterectomized woman work in. She will not be able to spontaneously create from the mind field to actually manifest in this dimension and maintain. Can't do it. So everything that she has created prior to her hysterectomy, she can maintain, but not anything new. They can't do it. And it is by their own choice, because they have conceded to a mindset that is not in alignment with creating from the position of who they are, which is why they lost the uterus. So what I think is so wonderful about this, because I talked about this yesterday, is the fact that wherever we get stuck in our perception of reality is where we are stuck in our mind and in the brain. That is to say that however we are stuck in our mindset, then we are not able to stimulate new areas of the brain that offers new horizons and new potential and function from the physical body. So the frontal lobes of the brain have the capacity to stimulate and produce neurotransmitters that will cause the cells in the body to regenerate themselves. Spontaneous regeneration of organs is a reality for human beings. But it cannot occur if the frequency of thought of the individual is of a frequency too low to activate frontal lobe activity. All levels of the brain actually have to have a frequency of electrical activity flowing through it before it causes the cells to stimulate and make neurotransmitters. And the frontal lobes require high frequency thought patterns to do that. And if a person is stuck in a lot of illusionary thoughts, which are of a lower vibration or magnitude, they are never ever able to activate the frontal lobes. So when a person is willing to change their thoughts and belief systems, and which will allow them to increase their thought frequency, then they can access, if they so choose, and program the frontal lobes of the brain to stimulate their body to regenerate itself on whatever level they want. So the idea of a woman having a hysterectomy, that to be a permanent state of existence, is only because of her belief system, nothing else. And that's the same thing for amputees. If you've lost an arm or leg or finger, that is only a state of existence for you indefinitely because of your belief system. So if you don't believe that you can get another finger or leg, etc., you can't. Because as soon as you think that you can get another one, then that opens the gateway of the brain for you to actually then find out how. Because you then will be able to draw that information to you. Because you have to remember that everything is a resonance. It's a giving and receiving. And all answers have already been answered. Or should I say all questions have already been answered.
A woman not recognizing or being ignorant of her divinity and not behaving in a godlike manner, as you said, goddess manner, would it also stand to reason then that a man does not recognize, ignores his God state? Because if a woman has the capacity, a capability of producing the, she needs a man, so would it still stand to reason that he does not recognize his God state?
Okay, well, it stands to reason that he does not recognize his God state because of what?
Not because of you, but a woman does not recognize, you said that she is a divinity, does not recognize her goddess like state, therefore these things happen to her. And an example you gave, as I understood, was what happened in your third. Okay. And I'm listening to that, and I'm wondering if you talk about acceptance, then does it mean that the woman is responsible for what happens to her because she does not recognize her goddess state?
Yeah, and she's responsible for what happens to her if she recognizes it.
If she recognizes it, that's not valid, but out of ignorance that happens to her, that's not a problem.
See, what we're finding out is that this dimension is what we call the mirror effect. Okay, and whatever you're experiencing is actually a reflection of yourself. So if you know that you're a goddess and you act that out, then your environment is going to reflect that. If you don't know that you're a goddess and you don't act it out, your environment has to reflect that.
I guess I'm having problems with whether or not you say that a woman should accept responsibility for the behavior perpetrated by her, the man who burnt her. And I was having problems with it because I'm thinking about a bad women's situation where if I'm not recognizing my goddessness and the man perpetrates and beats me, then it's my fault. And that's not what you're saying.
Well, let me say this. Everything is an interaction. Okay, everything is an interaction. At some level, all parties have contributed to the end result of that experience. There's no such thing on this planet as an ultimate victim.
By the virtue of the fact that she stayed in it, that she's contributed.
Or just by the virtue of the fact that she was in that space, in time, period. It's just like if a person walks into a place where there's a robbery going on. That's responsibility, at least in that person has decided to be there. That means that he also is now exposed to and can receive whatever good, blessings or whatever is bestowed upon that space. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so I'm saying that there is an ultimate order to things, and this is very interesting that when we begin to live what I call a purposeful life, then you will actually see the rhythm and you will actually see the alignment of everything that happens in your life relative to your purpose. You'll see that there's nothing accidental, that you'll see that nothing happens to just be a passing fancy. When you decide to put yourself in your proper place in space, which is what purpose is. Purpose is only an agreement that you're now going to put yourself in your own proper place in space that has actually been created for you. Nothing gets to this dimension that does not have a space in time created for it. And when we decide that we want to be in other spaces and other times, etc., doing things based on what somebody else says is important, or because we have our own insufficiencies around seeing ourselves relative to what we've been created to do, to support ourselves, etc., we push ourselves in other places in time that weren't even created for us to be in. And we feel the discomfort there. Yes.
For instance, what comes to my mind is when traveling to that space where the robbery may take place, that the thought might occur, go to the supermarket instead. And instead of going to the supermarket, I'll go to that place where the robbery happens. And that was a conscious decision for me to be in that place that I really was not supposed to be.
So, you know, we are constantly transmitting and receiving information all the time. But because we have such little information on how our physical body really works, we're not really able to appreciate and process a lot of the data that comes in. And many people are highly sensitive and highly intuitive that are actually on medication and diagnosis being schizophrenics and manic depressives, etc., because we are in a society where we are having people who are making diagnoses and assumptions with very little information about what is really happening on a human level in all of our bodies. I mean, most of my colleagues don't recognize that there are 5 bodies. Not at all. Their thing is that, you know, you've got a physical body. Even though they know there's a psychic that they talk about and there's emotional stuff, I mean, as far as, you know, giving it definite respect and concreteness, etc., none of that. That's why we push so many drugs on people when they start telling us things that they see this and hear that and a whole bunch of other things. And what we're finding out that's so interesting is that each has a different level of perception. And it is directly tied to the amount of melanin that we contain. Because we're finding out that melanin is a very interesting polymer substance that definitely has an affinity to be able to absorb and reflect all levels of the electromagnetic spectrum. So, you know, one of my most interesting challenges is to begin to try to educate the general public about the level of science and research that is going on, because there's almost a 20-year deficit between what the scientists know and what's been revealed to the general public. And so when I stand before the general public and I say these things, everybody's looking at me like I'm crazy and that this is just outrageous. But it's all right there in the science books, and it's really considered old stuff. I mean, this stuff was known, you know, 25, 30 years ago. And so that's why most people do not understand how computers work. Or they don't understand, for example, you know, virtual reality. Okay, how many of us have actually had a dream that we were falling, or that we were on the toilet, for example, okay, urinating, and lo and behold, because we caught ourselves and we fell, or might even had an accident and urinated, that we finally figure out that our bodies have been in the bed all the time. Okay, the key here is that why is it that your body being in the bed didn't act like it was in the bed in your dreams? I mean, why were you falling and your body jumped, which was what woke you up, to let you know that you weren't really falling, that you were in the bed? Why is it not until you actually realize that you were getting wet, even though in your mind you're supposed to be on the toilet and this wet sensation shouldn't be on you, okay, that you woke up? And it is because the body only does what the mind tells it. The body only does what the mind tells it. And so that's why the virtual reality information is so heavy, especially for people who don't know that relationship yet. So when you go and you buy a virtual reality machine and you slap that up on your forehead, that gives you sound and gives you visual experiences, and when you can either wink your eyelid or move your finger, and it actually then projects your whole body in a frame of reference that you're actually sitting in the chair in, that is awesome for a person that has no conception of how the mind and the body and the emotions works. And I say to the general public that it's a very, very, very dangerous instrument to get involved in until you have a better understanding of who you are.
So what does that put us now about the uterine fibroids?
Well, what it puts you now in is, first of all, in summary, let me just say this, is that this is the goddess, and if you know it, she has a uterus on her forehead. tubes and ovaries. That is the diadem. Because the conscious mind and the uterus function the exact same way. Whatever the uterus is impregnated with, it will attempt to nurture that until it reaches a state of maturity where it can exist on its own out in our external environment. That is the exact same thing that your mind does. And when we are not using our mind relative to how it was created, or we have misperceptions and misconceptions that we nurture, then those are going to actually be manifested in our outer world for us. If we get a sperm that has distorted genes in it, etc., our uterus will nurture that, etc., and 6 months, 8 months, 9 months later, that will actually be born out into our environment, and we will notice that that baby has a defect. They function the exact same way. So therefore, it's very crucial for women to begin to understand that they have to begin to learn about the capacity of the mind. They have to begin to learn about themselves. Definitely begin to think about the fact that they have a purpose in life, and begin to make concrete decisions about what they want for themselves. Because if a woman doesn't want to have surgery and she doesn't want a hysterectomy, that can be a reality for her. But the key is that you have to get the information. And that information for most of us has not been exposed to you yet, which is going to require time and study, and for you to then look over your values, because it is a distorted value system that has allowed you to create this chemical conflict in your body. That's why this has a support group mechanism that goes along with it, and it is known as lifestyle support. Because anytime if you have opinions about yourself or opinion about men, etc., that does not allow you to be comfortable, does not allow you to feel secure and safe, etc., that thought is going to create neurotoxins in your bloodstream that are going to affect your tissues, because that is not healthy. So I hear many women talk about they're no good men, or just a whole bunch of other things, etc., and that is an illusionary state based on your decision to give that conclusion to your own personal experiences. But every time you do that, it sets you up to have that exact experience reflected to you in your external environment. So if a woman decides, because of how the mind works, if you seed it with a thought, it has to nurture that and actually magnetize events in your life to reflect that to you. Every time you say something like that, you will have an experience that will be an affirmation for that thought. So it's a relative reality, the one that you created. That's the exact same thing about disease on a chronic nature. That uterine fibroids are actually something that a woman has created because of her not knowing who she is, etc., relative to the belief system that she was created to actualize. You find that women with uterine fibroids, African women eat a diet that is alien to their genetic makeup. We are not constructed to tolerate high concentrations of animal fat and protein. And so to eat that, our body does not know how to assimilate it properly, and it is not eliminated properly, and forms waste products that can occlude the body. It's functioning. So we have to learn how to eat properly again, based on our genetic makeup. To change cultural values is a group interaction. And when individuals are not able to function in a group capacity, especially if that is your value system, and that is as an African woman, then you automatically are set up for a disease. That's why support group activity to eradicate uterine fibroids is a necessity. So we have a support group that allows us to be able to discuss our belief systems, to look at them, to ask ourselves, to have a belief system like that, is that comfortable? Then what is the payoff for having a belief system like that? If you think it and you immediately go into discomfort, you automatically have made yourself ill. Instantly, you can identify that. So then how can we help you to then help you feel comfortable with changing that belief system so that you can think a thought and not go into discomfort and be comfortable? Because it's guaranteed that if you think the thought and you're not in discomfort, it's the truth of that thought for you is going to be reflected back to you. So you have to learn how to eat properly again. You have to learn how to release thoughts that immediately bring discomfort to you, upon you. and to substitute those with belief systems that are comfortable for you, relative to you. What is your reason for being? Why aren't you on purpose?
Well, I'm sitting here thinking that you apparently are not a traditional gynecologist. That to me says that you've got to make some adjustments in order to be able to still be able to take care of yourself. I mean, having some kind of monetary base, you still got to be able to live. How do you reconcile that within yourself? Because like I've got training to do certain things, but those things may or may not be good for my health.
Right, but see, we're not talking about training anymore. We're talking about purpose. When a person's on purpose, they're already endowed with the talent and the gift to perform whatever it is in a very divine way, as opposed to being trained by somebody else so that you can learn how to do something. It's a difference between how a piano virtuoso plays the piano versus somebody that was trained to play it. Totally like night and day. I was trained to be a gynecologist, but I am a natural metaphysician, and that's what I practice. Okay, so it's like I've gone beyond just the physical level of dealing with disease, because I realize that the physical manifestation is the end result of a disease manifestation that has been in process for too many people many, many years. Do you understand what I'm saying? So my thing was I had to decide what was I going to be, what I was trained to be or what I was created to be. And so I created some very intense challenges for myself to help me make the decision. So it was impressed upon me that my work was so crucial that I could not continue to occupy space and time that was not about what I was supposed to do. So I had a real interesting experience to help me make that decision. It's known as cancer. And because I decided that I wanted to live, I realized that I didn't want to live with one lung. And I was not interested in having surgery and scars on my chest, because I've done lobectomies on people, and I've stuck chest tubes in, and I've given chemotherapy, and I've subscribed radiation. And I've seen what it's done to people, and I was not convinced that it really helped, which is why I stopped doing that. So that meant then that the first thing is, on this planet, is for you to be able to master it, that you have to have a physical body. Now, there's a lot of people that have left here, the Carnegies, the Fords, etc. They left lots of money here, but they're not here. So they haven't mastered anything. The key here, first law of mastering this planet, is that you must have a physical body. First law, not money, physical body. Okay, and I got real clear about that when I was ill. The next law is that the more intact your physical body is, the more dexterity and flexibility you have in being able to master the planet, because every cell in the body is relative and relevant. So just because a person doesn't know what something does has nothing to do with whether it knows what it's supposed to do, because nature, being the greatest accountant in the universe, does not waste energy. So that means that if you have it, it's for a reason. And if you don't know what it is, then you have to decide if you're going to be responsible enough to find out what it's for. Okay, but just to assume that, you can take out a spleen or cut out a gallbladder, remove a uterus, and it's okay, is it okay? Relative to what and whose standards? So the next thing is that we understand that what you believe determines what your quality of life is going to be, not how much money you have. So individuals who basically don't believe that they're worthy and that they should have a high quality life, regardless of how much money they have, they catch hell every day. And most of you all spend your time watching on TV, because that's what those stories are about. Dallas, all those things. Those are about people that have tons of money and live in hell every day. They can't trust people. Their kids still get sick and die. The whole bit, because money does not deal with any of that. Because it is a state of consciousness. So that means then that you can decide how much money you want to make, when you want to make it, and how you're going to have it, because that's what that is all about. It's a state of consciousness. The individual can take a rock from a beach and put 2 eyeballs on it and stick some little felt feet on it and make $1 million and call it a pet rock. So now, somebody else can do something so ingenious as make a satellite and be poor. Now, what's the difference? And it's a state of consciousness. I mean, personally, my opinion, I think I have more respect for the ingenuity in a satellite than somebody going to a beach and taking a rock and putting some eyeballs on it and some felt feet and making $1 million, and the person who makes a satellite is penniless. I look at Coca-Cola as a wonderful example of that. Stuff is totally worthless, has done more damage on the planet than most anything I can identify. People wait outside in line in the morning for Coke. Can't live without them. Things are everywhere. I was up in the jungles in Mexico, and the road was about this big, and we had to move into the mountain to let a big Coca-Cola truck come. You couldn't see houses for miles because it's all jungle. These people live in huts, but they know what Coca-Cola is. And so my thing was, how does something this worthless have such a famous name and everybody wants it? And the reason why is because of the state of consciousness of the marketing people at Coca-Cola. It has nothing to do with the worth of it and value of it, and does it do anything good for mankind? It does none of that. It's a state of consciousness. So you make a living based on your state of consciousness. And if you don't believe that you can make a living being happy and doing wonderful things, etc., enjoying life, then you won't. And if you think that you basically have to be enslaved and you got to do something that you don't want to, etc., because of whatever your work ethic is that you've been handed down, then that's what you'll have to live under. But everybody doesn't live like that. You have people that do nothing but play basketball all day, and they're millionaires, play golf, bowl. Some people do nothing but draw and paint all day. Some people do nothing. They just go travel. They make money all kinds of ways. So the key is that you have to learn that it is your state of consciousness that's determining all of this. And that's what this whole support group is about, because it's built on helping women to recognize their will to fail. See, anytime you go to a job every day and tell a lie like that, you have a will to fail. Anytime you basically say that you want companionship and you want a nice man, and then you turn around out the same mouth and say there's no good men or they can't be trusted, you have a will to fail. Anytime that you would say that you'd rather have a part of your body removed as opposed to actually figuring out what you can do to keep yourself whole, you have a will to fail. And we need to understand that that has been something that really has been ingrained in most of us, a will to fail. So success is basically what is important to you. I'm real glad to just be here and do this work. So I'm guaranteed that I will always have a place to stay and food to eat, and whatever I think about that I want, I will have. Why? Because I understand the relationship that I have with universal laws. The universe says that whoever supports it will automatically be supported, and whatever you desire will be granted. So, I mean, it's a breeze for me. And when it's not, I realize that this is out of order. And these are the things that you have to learn for yourself. And that's what the support group is about. The references and the studies that we have there, that's what that's about. And the person who supports you in helping you lovingly to relinquish these belief systems that cause you to fail every day is there to support you to do that. There are no more diseases on this planet that are going to be eradicated on an exclusive basis. None of them. So as long as people have their insecurities, their fears of interacting with other people, etc., they will die by themselves. So it's a universal problem that we're having on the planet. And we have to come together, each and every one of us, and be willing to do our part, if for no other reason but to admit that we have a problem and ask for help. Because just doing that will then bring it. But the idea of taking off part of the body, I mean, nobody's creating a body yet. This thing is divine. It is sacred. It's fabulous. It's fantastic. And we don't know what it can't do yet. We know what people have settled for because they haven't thought of anything different. But we don't know what it cannot do yet. And so to just continuously attack this, manipulate it, etc., as though it is the worst thing that ever happened to you is not true. It's your best friend. It's the only way you can master this dimension, through this body. And I've heard so many people project so many things very negative about their body. not realizing that this is the key to be here. So this is the whole issue that we have to basically learn to turn around so that we can get the best out of what's really here for us. Heaven and hell is a perception. There's no place you have to go. So, I didn't bring a kid up here. Can somebody hand me a kid? Back there? Uh-huh.
You mentioned the foods that we eat.
Mm-hmm.
Is it sufficient that if the diet changes, that the fibroids can go away, or there must be more to it beyond the...
That's how I treated fibroids for years, just changing diet. You know, I probably have about maybe 400 charts in my office where I just changed the diet. And we watched them go down, etc. And as soon as they went on vacation or they got tired of cooking properly for themselves, etc., they would come back in about a year. So their periods were heavy again, etc. Their stomach is all bloated out because the fibroids were back.
So, in other words, it's similar to the herbs and the vitamins that you talked about. If you change them once you stop, then they will come back. So,
see, because
whatever that diet change is, you must continue that for the rest of your life.
No. What I'm saying to you is that every species on this planet has a way of being. And as long as you're not being what you were created to be, you will always have a symptom in your body to remind you of that. In the case of uterine fibroids, this is a continuous stimulus from conflicting values in your mind, which register as conflicting chemicals in your blood that actually cause this uterus to undergo this distortion. How can a diet, how can herbs actually permanently suppress something that you're permanently creating? Unless you don't permanently keep it up. We're not created to have to be enslaved to anything, except to just being what we were created to be. So that's why we were supposed to be born taking vitamin pills forever. I mean, the Creator, I'm sure, could have put that whole sack on us when we got here. No problem with doing that. You understand what I'm saying? But based on how you're supposed to be created, there's a way of life for you. It's like taking a car that has already told you that it works best on mobile oil. And you decide for whatever reason that you're not going to give it mobile oil, that you're going to give it whatever you think it should have. Now you can do that. But now when the car starts sputtering and coughing, and when you don't get the mileage that you're supposed to, and when you got to change the spark plugs more often, and when the pistons don't fire like they should, etc., who has the problem? Because you were already instructed up front that this car was created to use certain things. So when it comes to food and nourishment, human beings, depending upon what type of species they are required to do and need certain things. Orientals need certain things different from Caucasians. Africans need certain things different from Caucasians or Orientals or Indians. And that is about specificity. It has nothing to do with inferiority or anything like that. It has something to do based on your purpose. And when we look at how they're structured differently.
So does this workshop or program, Fibroid Clinic, speak to the things that African women, African American women need?
Yeah, this one does. And it's interesting because as I've been working with this, I've had so many Caucasian women, even though there's a much smaller population of them out of Caucasian women that have uterine fibroids, about 28% the literature says, that this program has to be rewritten for them. There are many universal tenets in there for them, but they have a different diet than we do. They need a different diet than what this one offers. It's not really appropriate for them because unless Caucasians have a lot of melanin-dominant interaction in their bloodline this lifetime, they need concentrated protein and more fat than what this diet prescribes because this diet is created for the African metabolism.
So how do you deal with mulattoes in America?
Well, mulattoes in America, because they're melanin dominant, can basically deal with this. See, it really is dependent right now, physically, upon how much melanin you have and you don't have. Because melanin is not something that just colors the hair and eyes and skin. It's in all the organs of the body, depending upon who you are. And Caucasians are melanin recessive, and even within the Caucasian population, there are Caucasians that are more melanin dominant, such as Italians, etc., as opposed to Swedish individuals, which are truly melanin recessive.
How do you determine how much melanin one has?
You can look at them and see.
You can just look.
Of course. I mean, you can look at it and see, because this is your means of being able to deal with extra environmental activity.
So the person very dark, would you naturally assume that person's more melanated than a person who was lighter complected?
I mean, right, because it actually is what gives color. But also what happens is those people who are have a tremendous amount of melanin have different perceptive realities than those people who are very light, because of the nature of what melanin does. So you have to understand that there's more energy in red than there is in pink. That's what makes the difference between the two colors, even though they have the same family frequency of red. So to get the same type of reaction from pink that you do with red is impossible, because we talk about an energy gradation and an interaction. So when you learn how to see things from an energetic perspective, it makes it very simple what I'm saying. Okay, and so I'm just saying that, you know, Africans in America are eating a diet that is not in their best interest, and they will have many, many physical symptoms because of it.
Whether this program works for some fibroids you discussed early on, the submucosal, all of the different terms that you use, would you have to do a particular evaluation to determine whether or not?
I mean, but that's for you to do. It's an ultrasound. But we know when you are healthier and when you're not. Okay, so let me just finish this real quick, and I'm going to introduce you to a few things. So this is, it's a 5-tape cassette album, and this is the manual that I've talked about. We have a whole line of herbs that help to support the body for heavy bleeding, for swelling, to help dissolve the stagnation in the fibroid, to help increase ovarian function. I mean, you know, all of the things that I see that actually have supported on some level of your five beings with uterine fibroids has been addressed here. The entire physical structure of the woman has been addressed at this level. And it is the only program that I've seen that actually gives the type of healing that is really deserving of a human. It's really very interesting. So, you know, I just want to let you know that our support group is scheduled to start on the 14th, 15th of July, and this is Miss Foster Britton. She is the facilitator that is going to start the support group here. I don't have a manual. You want to hold it up? But there's a whole manual, and it's a whole course, really, that the facilitator has been instructed to carry out. Now, Miss Britton is unique in that she was with me as a facilitator in my initial in-house clinical program when I first started this program in 1989. This was an in-house program that I did in my own institute and observed these women for over a year and made my final conclusions and adaptations so that this could actually be done in the home. Yeah, so yeah, this is a facilitator's manual here. And there's also a manual for support group participants. We also have a guest here from New York from my support group. And that New York support group has been in existence the longest. Their anniversary was just last week, as a matter of fact, for 1 year. And to have initially seen these women when they came to the group a year ago and to see them now has been just very rewarding. So fibroids have shrunk, you know, 20 weeks down to the size of a grape, etc. But that's really minuscule compared to what's really happened to these women, because these women have now actually stepped into being themselves. Many of them were extremely overweight. They had low self-esteem. They just had a whole bunch of other problems, etc. And they've all just transitioned and metamorphed out of that, which is what real healing is about. I mean, to just get rid of a symptom and still walk around in the same psychological misery and fear and insecurity and devastation is not really a human at all. Ms. Harris, you want to come up and share a few things?
Hi, my name is Adiola. I started with the support group in New York a year ago in June. When I met Dr. Pookrum, we had a sister named Dia, who was our support group facilitator. She had a health symposium at the National Black Theater. And a friend of mine is a nurse, and I had just been diagnosed as a rule-out ovarian cancer and a rule-out rectal cancer. I had, in 1985, had a fibroid that totally displaced the uterus, so I had surgery, and they removed the uterus. So then in 91, I started having a lot of vaginal pain and bleeding, and I was going to my doctor telling them that I kept feeling like there was something in my vagina that was pressing or pushing down. Initially, they couldn't feel anything, but after doing sonograms, a lot of different tests, there was a tumor that was there about 3 centimeters in size. So my girlfriend she says, well, you're in the profession. You know how to do your research. You know how to assess whether something is, whether this person is for real or a quack. That's what she said. So she says, but I'm a vegetarian myself, and she pulled out her statistics. And she said, well, studies have shown that people, when they eat a certain way or have a certain lifestyle, that they don't have these diseases. She said, I have all the statistics here. So she gave me some literature that she had, but she wasn't willing to step out as a physician. What she was willing to do was to support me in that if I needed to have tests or blood work, that she would take care of that aspect of it. So so I got on the program and we met with the support group. And the support group has been instrumental for me, and that I was really, really out of it. You know, I was in a lot of pain, and to have sisters come together and to support me, my thing was, well, what am I going to do about this pain? Sometimes I couldn't get out of my bed. So this is really a blessing for me to be able to stand up and walk around this long, because after I started with her program in April, but in June was when I stopped working, and when I had just gotten to the point where I was literally confined to my bed because of the bleeding and the pain. Everybody was saying, well, you know, bed rest when you're bleeding. So the support group helped in the sense that no one in my family wanted me to do this, because they said, well, you know, you're intelligent, you're the nurse. Whenever we need something, we always go to you. That's what they do. The doctor tells them something. Nita, should we do this? And so I said, well, you should know that I am with it enough to do my research, okay? And so having other people who knew, there were people who were vegetarians, there were people who weren't, going through detoxification reactions and not really understanding that it was a detoxification reaction. It's just like eating the meat, eating the sugar, having the caffeine. I was a Pepsi drinker, a coffee drinker, having all of that come from my system, and then getting real irritable and not being able to have people around me. I was like, well, you know, what's happening to me? But having a network of sisters there who could say, well, you know, I did that, and after a month, I felt like real tired. People talk about being real tired, being real irritable, and noticing that being in the environments that was creating the disharmony was getting even worse to be in. So the support group has grown tremendously because we have stuck together, we have a buddy system, whereas when you start the program, you connect with the sister or a couple of sisters and you just make contact. You do things like going and shopping for the food. Some sisters are taking cooking classes and will come back and give cooking classes. We have sisters who've been in crises where their pain has been so bad that, well, I'm going to go have it cut out, and then we're like, okay, let's sit down, let's talk this through, and we just take that sister through the whole system. We had one sister who was thinking about having surgery, but who was in a relationship that wasn't harmonious for her, who needed our support, and as a result of that, she moved out of that environment. She has not had the surgery, and her fibroids are shrinking. We had sister who started out with the fibroid, who has gone back to her doctor, and he has said, where is the fibroid? So it does work, but it does also take a level of commitment, a level of willingness of stepping out of that which you think has been right for you. Okay, because anything that's going to cause pain, discomfort, or conflict is a way of telling you, no, you are out of alignment, you're not in harmony with what your purpose is and what you're supposed to do here on the universe. For me to stand up here and talk in front of you would not have happened before, okay, because I really was not that outgoing. So now I'm finding myself that I'm able to get up and do this. And it's really a blessing for me to see that the way that I can relate it is the sisters that come to the support group, as we call them babes, and for me to be a veteran and to support them through the process, because I was like, oh yeah, I was there, I remember people doing that for me. So it really helps to have a network of sisters who want to heal, who want to step out and to recognize that, yes, you know, I am important too, that it's okay for me to be on this planet and recognize who I am, to be the color that I am, to have the features that I have, to have the hair that I have. And it's okay, it's nothing wrong with that, that I don't have to step out of who I am to be here on this planet. Because stepping out of who I am also means that I may lose my life. And that I had to make a decision with also, because I had a big death wish. I didn't want to be here anymore. So I realized that the illnesses I created was a passage for me to get out of here. So I had to also make a decision to be here, you know, and then as I made that decision, it's like things just to show up for you to move in that direction to have life, because I had to make a commitment to enjoy being alive and to want to utilize my life force energy in alignment with whatever God has for me to do and what my purpose is here on the planet. So I'm still working on that. And if you just get together and recognize that we as sisters need to begin to come together for information other than men bashing, sister bashing, and for, you know, without the fashion, that we need to really come together and start healing ourselves. The first place that you have to start is with yourself, where you can step out and talk about healing anyone else. Because then if you can be the living example, then somebody else can see from your lifestyle. So I have my family saying to me, you know, what have you done? You look great. You look, I'm so glad you did that. Whereas before I had all these problems with, don't do that, is she okay, have you checked into her credentials, you know, and it really wasn't about that. It was really about what choice I had to make for myself. So, if there are any questions.
So how's your health?
Excuse me?
How's your health and what is your doctor?
Oh, okay. Well, in September I had a sonogram, and the tumor that was there, they can't find the tumor. Okay. Now I have pain on occasion, but it's not nearly like it was. And now the bleeding that I have, I say, is my menstrual cycle that I never wanted, because I never wanted my period, and I was not okay with it. I used to hate it. So I say that that's giving me another opportunity to accept my womanhood and to step into that with the original belief system that I came here with, that I came here as a woman. So then I need to begin to take on all the responsibilities of me stepping into my womanhood, into my goddesshood.
So are you bleeding excessively, or you just...
No, now it just comes on, it's just like a regular period. It will come on for 3 days and then go, and I chart it on the calendar every month. So now I'm an interesting case with the doctor, so I have to be careful who I see.
Oh, you remember they did a hysterectomy now. This woman is having a period every month.
Yeah. So, yeah, because I've had doctors who wanted to treat me for free as a result of that. They're interested in studying me. So, I define that. And so I'm real clear about what I have to do. And I just keep working at it. Okay.
I do want to say this, and then I would like for Ms. Britton to come up faster, is, you know, the reason why I do this work is for 3 simple reasons. One is because I want to live. Secondly is because this is what I agreed to come here to do. And thirdly, because of being able to know that being a tool through which the Creator can manifest has allowed women to totally metamorph like this. These are the only 3 reasons why I do this work. I have found that in my life experience, this is the hardest work for me to do because of the suspicion, the negativity, the questions that I have to be bombarded with every time I open my mouth. I mean, it's like I left a $150,000 job just working in the hospital, just cutting on folks. The more hysterectomies I did, the more bonuses I would get at the end of the year, plus my $150,000. You know, and when I was doing that, all the sisters smiled. They thought it was so wonderful that it was a black woman in the hospital I could go and talk to, even though I was doing you a big disservice. Putting you on pills, giving you all these drugs, all this kind of stuff, etc. But the sisters loved it. And now when we really come into truth, I get a lot of resistance. And if it wasn't for those 3 reasons, that's the only reason why I get through days like this. And so you have to ask yourself, and that's why I'm bringing this to your attention, why? And I've seen this happen over and over and over again, especially as Africans and as African women. When someone asks us to take responsibility on any level for the experiences we had, when someone basically takes the time to bring data to us that you can actually calculate out. I mean, you calculate it out already, you know, that my thing is it's much easier to make money doing what I was doing than doing this. You know, it's like, you know, it costs $15,000 for a hysterectomy. And there are 2 million hysterectomies being done a year. That's what you all give the hospitals. When I was doing hysterectomies, it was 4,000, not including the hospital. And a third of that went to me. And then when you ask a woman to spend just $300 on a kit, then you have to all of a sudden have to be a hustler and a whole bunch of other things, and you have to be scrutinized. Even though you don't ask Coca-Cola to give you any ID about who they're doing this for, why. You don't ask Hershey's. You don't ask the cigarette company for any ID. All these things you willingly give to them, and dare not even ask for on credit. Willingly take your money. Wouldn't even dare go up there. I'm really strung out for some cigarettes. Can I have some credit? You don't even dare do that. Don't even dare do it. But then something that's really for you, that's really going to help you open your stuff out, I mean, it's scrutinized to the bone. And that, I have found, has been real intriguing as to all the things that you will let bring into your community. You buy McDonald's like they're going out of style just because they draped in kente cloth. Stuff is just as rot gut and poison as it can be, but now they draped in kente cloth, they get spreads in your newspaper, everything. I said, and here we are, this is an epidemic among African women, uterine fibroids. The European medical hospital establishment has decided already that you are a problem. You don't take care of your kids. And this is an ideal opportunity to get rid of as many uteruses as possible and get paid for it. So we get $15,000 a while. We get $300,000 every time you take a shot of Lupron and whatever else we might do to you. And you have never done any research to question that why, etc. And why is it that you have not seen one brochure put out by the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology telling you anything to do other than take Lupron and have a hysterectomy for uterine fibroids, in the face that they have already showed you that for all these other diseases, diet, stress reduction, massage, exercise, etc., is playing a role. So see, this is what I'm talking about the level of the will to fail and the self-hate that African women have adopted. That even people that come to you with actually truth and have no investment in basically trying to get anything out of your pocket. And we actually destroyed them because we've become so adjusted to taking on those value systems that have never ever been ours. So, you know, it's going into the last few years here before the 21st century. The resonance of energy that's going to be necessary to get through these next 3.5 years, not even the next 7, is going to be quite intense. And the diets that you're eating, the food that you're eating, the type of thoughts that you have, you're automatically going to take yourself out. This is the judgment, and most of you don't know that. They talk about in religious circles that we're halfway through the tribulation. You're right. Because by 1997, it's all going to slow down. And there's a lot of data that we don't have, and you have to ask yourself why you have so much suspicion toward yourselves, and that you have let any and everything walk into your communities that have brought you nothing for your best interests, and you give them rights to have your money, environment, and everything. So I really want you to understand that for me, this is actually the reason why I'm doing this, is because this is what I agreed to do. This is my life's work. And I had my own itinerary, but it was not the proper space and place for me. And I truly like living. I really do. And having created a space and time for myself where I could see that I was not going to be in a physical body, I had to make some decisions. And I shared this with you because if you do have people who are ill, that have serious diseases, etc., you have to understand what you're looking at. You are looking at an individual who has, up until that point in time, refused to be on purpose and is being given an opportunity to make some decisions about whether they will change or not. Because the physical body does not want to die. It does not want to be diseased. But it cannot override a made-up mind, especially one that's made up not to be in alignment with what is supposed to be happening in this dimension in relationship to you. Cannot do that. So the body knows what it's supposed to be doing, but if you will not take heed and understand, then there will be a separation of the two. And that's actually what death is about. So unless you have any more questions for me, I'm going to let Foster talk to you.
I do have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just trying to understand, what is it in this goddess here in the womb that's in her forehead? Mm-hmm. What's on the inside of the womb?
A human.
A human?
Mm-hmm. A divine being because of a divine consciousness. You know, I talk about certain concepts and they've been downplayed, and actually the true meanings have been robbed in the teachings. The Immaculate Concept, for example, most people that know anything about that think that that is just something that the conditions under which Jesus Christ was conceived. The Immaculate Concept is a technique through which you can use your mind for anybody. The Immaculate Concept is a capacity to take a situation, an individual, and think the highest thoughts about it continuously, irregardless of how it presents to you at the moment. And because the mind is the universal womb, by universal law, whatever your thoughts are, that is what will be born unto you. And so this is how you are able to make transformations in people without ever saying anything to them. How you can transform children without having to deal with them on a physical level. This works all over the universe. And so when a woman has an immaculate mind, then everything that comes through her and is brought into her environment is also immaculate. The key here is that most of us do not have the amount of discipline and the foresight to be able to see through and beyond a situation that might be presenting to us in ways that we would not rather see. But that is one of the laws of creation. Because if any of you could look into your uterus while your children are forming, if you did not have an immaculate concept, you would immediately want to get rid of that. Because fetuses and embryos and fetuses are very unattractive prior to birth, because they go through all kind of metamorphosis. They look like a frog at one point, a chicken at another, all these different things. And if you saw that and thought that this is how your baby was going to look, you would immediately not want to carry this. So I'm saying that through growth of everything, it's a law of development. That's why it's so important that we do not get stuck in a phase of development as it's developing and not have clear insight as to what the end result is going to be. So this is what the goddess is about. It is the capacity to see something in a divine, immaculate consciousness and nurture that thought only, knowing that it will be born into your world. So whether that's your health, whether that's relationships, whether that's being on purpose, the principle works for everything. And this is some of the things that we actually teach and remind you of, because this stuff is in your bodies, it's in your genes, it's just dormant because you've been so busy aspiring for other values and a lifestyle that has not been designed for you, that it cannot become activated and come to a conscious level.
Is that inside that energy? It looks like the cross with Jesus.
Well, that's a person.
Is it supposed to be in the form of a crucifixion?
Well, the key here is that the uterus, when it's cut on its side, is really the ankh, the key of life. It looks exactly like this.
The ankh.
Right. Which was actually a chemetic representation of the life force energy. So in Egypt, they have this little loop on a stick with a little, right. That's the uterus cut on its side. It takes the exact same figuration. Okay. So what you see in there is actually just a man flexing the arms and legs in the uterine cavity. But that's where all humans come from. They come from the female energies. And so you have to understand that, again, I'll say this again, is that being on planet Earth is a commitment to mastering the principle of magnetism. Regardless of whether you're a woman or a man, we're all here to master that because that is the dominant principle on this planet. So this is what it's all about. It's about being able to understand that we get what we have because of our degree of magnetic attraction. And the woman is the epitome of that. And it is the woman's responsibility to also cultivate and nurture that particular learning process and activation in the man. But when we ourselves don't understand that, then therefore they don't understand it either. And so therefore they don't have the magnetic principle in alignment to temper the electric activity that they carry.
Which results in
Destruction. Because the electric principle always dissipates. And you have to hear me clearly because you have never heard me talk about good or bad or not. It's just a fact. And if it wasn't for the electric or dissipating or what we call chaotic activity, many things that are necessary for life could not occur. Just the chewing of your food is an electric or dissipating or chaotic activity. But if you do not break the food down or dissipate it into its elemental structure, you can't absorb it to reassimilate and to rebuild yourself. It's a cycle. So they both are hand in hand. The key is that if you represent one principle versus the other, then you have to understand that under all circumstances, you have to represent that principle through that energy field. And that's where we're getting so confused with homosexual activity. It's an energetic confusion. It really is. So I have seen, for example, I was in New York and there was a woman and a man in the subway. And this woman was talking to this man in ways that were incredible. It was like really, really interesting. She was extremely antagonistic, very verbally abusive, etc. And she was talking to this man. That is a very harsh demonstration of the electric principle. You know, the electricity can do wonderful things like light up this overhead, but it also can shock you and kill you. And she was definitely into her electric principle. But to the extent that it was totally out of order, which means that when you become extreme of something, then you actually then get the extreme opposite reaction. Okay? And so I could see that she was actually creating a lot of problems for herself depending upon the individual that she was talking to. Because if he had been extremely electric at that time too, there would have been a real big explosion in the subway. So these are just basic scientific and physical principles that we operate under, that we have totally fallen into a state of ignorance under, that we have to regain to have mastery over matter in our environment. So you have to ask yourself, how do we stand 60 million strong in a country and we have nothing to show for it? I mean, if you came into America and if we were actually looking on a physical level as a representation of the African race, there is none. There is no place of commerce. There's no particular educational system. There's no transportation system. There's nothing. How do you do that? I mean, everywhere in the world that I've been, I always know when we are around. And it's not the highest signals. The first thing that always greets me normally is trash and paper. And that bothered me. In New York, I could go down Park Avenue, and as soon as I get to 120th Street, I would look in the back of the cab, and there's like a boulevard with flowers, and I look in the front, and there's paper and trash flying everywhere. And my thing is that, well, how does this happen? And you just cross the street. What is happening? Why doesn't the paper fly over on 119th Street? It just keeps going up to 121st. And my thing is, I don't understand that. How does this happen? But it's energy. It is an energy interaction. And the key of it is that the greatest magnets on the planet is the African. We are the greatest magnets with the greatest magnetic field. But magnetism is an energy. It doesn't know anything about good or bad. And it will magnetize to itself whatever the frequency is of the magnet. You know, all magnets don't magnetize the same thing. So if the magnet basically is of the frequency of dirt and trash, it will always be there. Always, all the time. No way you can ever do anything about it, except have a law on how you're going to handle the dirt and trash when it comes. And we haven't done any of that because we haven't spent time figuring out how we operate. So if you know that you're a magnet and you know that dirt and trash is going to be attracted, then if you don't want it, then there has to be a way that you're going to handle it. Which is you can recycle it, you can pick it up and put it in a container, you can burn it or whatever, but you have to be accountable and you got to do something with it. Europeans magnetize trash and paper too, but understanding that they have done something with it. They've decided, well, this is something we don't want, so we have to then erect a program and commit to using the program to keep it under control so that we can get that off of our magnetic surface so we can attract something else. But we haven't realized that this is what's happening here. These are energy exchanges that we have to be accountable for, so we have done absolutely nothing. And it's going to always be a problem until we take a look at the fact that we have these phenomena that occur and we have to devise a way of taking care of it and handling it. And we can't continue not looking at our stuff and deciding how we're going to handle it. But if you won't speak to each other on the street, how are you going to come up with an elaborate plan to handle garbage and paper? If you won't speak to each other on the street, how are you going to come up with an elaborate plan to have an educational system that's comfortable for all of us? If you don't speak to people on the street, then when you see yourself coming, how are you going to be able to work together and count money together? I was just walking here today, and out of all the African women that I saw, about 1% spoke. And it was usually the sisters that were in their 50s, etc. The women that were my age or younger, they would like look down at the ground or whatever before they would speak. And my thing is that, well, you know, this is deep and this is supposed to be the South. I expect that in New York. I mean, but this is the South. I mean, and you won't even speak.
Well, I tell you, here, people speak to each other more than people who come from the North speak to each other.
Oh, I'm sure. And I'm saying in the North, you know, but I'm saying that when we talk about Southern hospitality, you know, I'm like, okay, well, unless you know the person. I mean, because I'm just thinking that, you know, it should be hunky-dory. I mean, I went in Savannah, Georgia, and I didn't see many black people, but now the white people exemplified Southern hospitality. They were like, oh, honey, how are you? Where are you from? And yeah, and this, that, and the other. And they wanted to tell me about their whole history and this kind of thing and the other. And I thought that was just really interesting. I said, well, this is real interesting. And when I then found out that this is one of the biggest slave galleries in the country, and they had us all tied down picking that cotton, I thought that was real interesting because the white people act like they had never, ever done anything like slavery. They were so nice. I was like, this is incredible, you know? I mean, but I was really surprised. But the Africans, And my thing is that this is the reason why. It's a misuse of our creative energies. How can you not acknowledge yourself?
Yeah, but Dr. Jewell, would you say that the principle is the same in terms of attraction? When I walk down the street, I'm always getting smiles and greetings. And I attribute that because I carry the smile and the greetings with me. And so, I mean, really, everybody speaks to me. And
But see, I would agree to that. And what I do, I just normally just speak to people and just see. You know, I have just done that because that was one of my definitions on what a healthy person does. They just speak to people if they're in arm's reach. But what happens is that many times I have to pull people out of their normal not want to speak mode because they just, before you even get up to them, if they see you coming, they just normally turn their head down and their eyes, or they get busy looking at something else. So I just speak to them anyway. But I'm just saying that this natural tendency of not being excited to see yourself coming up the street, etc., is a real issue.
What was that you said about the homosexuality that you really left what you just...
I mean, yeah, because that's a whole lecture in understanding electromagnetic forces. Okay, and you know, it relates to, you know, food issues, it relates to the whole issues on what the basic energy was in the household with the mother and the father, a whole bunch of other things are going on there. You know, it's a real heavy issue, and you know, I spend time doing sex workshops because I found out there was so much distortion in our whole sexual activity that we had to really get clear on that. We haven't addressed all our sexual deviant problems. I mean, in the hospitals, I mean, it was nothing to have to deal with, you know, rape, nothing to deal with actual child abuse, sexual molestation of babies, etc. This is Africans on Africans. We haven't addressed any of these issues. And I'm saying from picking up paper in our neighborhoods to basically dealing with our sexual stuff, we haven't dealt with any of our stuff. And the key is, how can we be grown people when we haven't managed to be able to feed ourselves, clothe ourselves, transport ourselves? We deal with none of our social problems. One of the greatest awarenesses for me was the fact that even when you go to the hospital that we become so dependent upon, they measure you against a white woman's standards. Do you look white to you? And my thing is that, well, hell, how are you going to get better when they're looking at you as a white woman? They're defining your blood chemistry by a white woman's. They're defining how you should respond as a white woman. And my thing of it is that that's crazy. Because in botany class, if I wanted to get the best out of a daisy, I basically used the daisy standard. And when I wanted to deal with dandelions, I used the standard for the dandelions. And when I wanted to get orchids better, I used orchid standards. I didn't try to compare dandelion standards to orchid and expect the orchid to do the best it could. So my thing is that, well, where did that come from? But then I got into the economics of understanding what's happening. If I am going to take my money and get some of my friends together, and we're going to form a hospital that's going to take care of me and my kids, then we're going to use the standard that we are. Now, when I open the doors, if you all want to come in there, you can, but the standard is going to be one that makes sure that my family is taken care of. This is just finance. So when I got clear on that, I said, oh yeah, now this is actually dealing with adulthood. So they understand that. So the key of it is I said, well, maybe could we have been a little more honest on the marketing? That you knew that the standard was going to be for white folks because it was my money as a white man that I formed this hospital, that if you're going to open your hospital in a Hispanic area or an African area, that you could have said that in the marketing. So that when they came in there, they would have known that you could perhaps put a Band-Aid on them or whatever else, but I mean some serious evaluations we can't do because we use European standards.
One of the questions that probably everybody's got is that we don't know doctors that we can trust who actually do look at us. Is there anything that we can do about it?
But see, it's not about trusting the doctors, because you have to understand that, you know, here in America, it's supply and demand. So the thing of it is that that's why Europeans spend so much time becoming informed consumers. So they can make sure that who's selling them stuff, they sell them stuff for their best interests. We're not informed consumers. And so you don't go into the hospital and ask whose standard that is that you're measuring me by. But I mean, you know, that's what you have to do, because then that will actually then ask the doctor to then even think about it if he hadn't thought about it. Because there are standards for Africans, and they know this, but they're not going to take their whole hospital and set it up on your standard when you don't pay for it. So if you want your standard to be for an African man and an African woman, then you have to be willing to invest in that. And we haven't decided that we need a hospital yet, even though we've decided we need a hospital. So it's not about, so what are the doctors going to do? You think that if all the black doctors found out that they were using white standards and then decided to use black standards in the hospital, that the hospital's going to pay for that? You know what they're going to do? They're going to tell you that you can't practice that here. Okay, because personally, everything is set up to deal with white people. So that means you have to change the the solutions in the tubes and everything. And you can't do that here unless you're going to pay for it. So see, the key here is that once you become aware, then there's another responsibility also, and it goes back to basically providing for yourself what you need. So then that means now collectively, instead of us going and volunteering at their hospitals and going off doing a whole bunch of things like playing bridge or whatever else we do, which is what you do after you've taken care of your basic needs, we have to come back. See, we've gone retrograde. See, we put the vocational stuff before the basics, and we got to leave that alone and come back to basic, taking care of the basics. You got to come out of those kind of activities and start actually putting together things, companies, businesses, to take care of your basics, to get you a hospital, to get clinics and things, and to find out doctors who want to know about themselves and relearn what they need you so that you can get the proper care. And this is what normally the woman would ask of the man. Because she would say, I would need this, I would need that, and then it's the man's responsibility to go out in the world and actually make a way so that it can happen. But see, the woman has to come up with the bright idea, because first of all, she has to be willing to want something for herself. So whether that's shoes that fit her feet or a hospital system that's going to take care of her and her husband and her children, it has to first of all be her desire. And then the man, being her support person, will then go out and help that to be a reality. And that's my personal opinion. I feel that why our men are so upset with us, because we don't request for them to do nothing. So we decided to get real electric and go out here and do everything. And that's definitely not our place. And so therefore the things that really need our attention and time, we don't have time for anymore. And so therefore the whole thing falls down to the ground. So the key is that we're so out of alignment that we don't even know what to do with ourselves. Let's know how we're going to know what our man is supposed to be to us and all these other different things. We just got that all backwards. And our uterus is showing us that. How are you going to cut out that kind of dilemma? And that's why I'm so concerned about hysterectomized women, because they still live with all of this frustration and false values that they live out every day. So there is a lot that we have to do, but because we are really endowed and blessed people, we can do all kind of magical things in no time. But we have to be willing to let go of somebody else's time schedule, somebody else's value. We can observe how other people do it, but we have to understand that that is an option, and some of the steps they use, we can use, but then it might have to deviate into a whole new thing, and not be afraid to do it and to try. You know, we feel that many of us that we can't do anything unless we have European degrees. You know, I want to be a teacher. The first thing we got to do is drop everything and run back to get a degree in a European educational institution to teach. When we see over and over again that they ain't teaching nothing. That's what I think is so incredible. It'd be tremendous if they was coming out being, you know, fantastic teachers, but nothing happens in there. And we just run in there so diligently and sit and pay our money, and then come out and perpetuate a whole bunch of craziness that we see does not work for us. And the key is that the teachers have already been taught. The Creator has already anointed the real teachers. And they don't have to go to anybody's institution, regardless of what color they are, to teach. But if they don't have any insecurity about themselves, and they feel a need to have to be accepted by somebody outside of themselves, then it's never going to come out, which is the whole issue that we as Africans are dealing with. We do not feel that what we intuitively have and the capacities that we have are good enough. And that not unless they are stamped by white people are we going to accept it. And the key is we have to keep asking ourselves why. Because what necessarily is good for them is not necessarily what is going to be in our own best interest. It has to be different. And being different is fine. There's no problem with that. It doesn't talk about inferiority. It doesn't talk about superiority. It just talks about uniqueness. And why we as Africans have such an issue with uniqueness is beyond me. We feel we have to make excuses for how we are. You know, our skin color, our butt size. I mean, where are you going to make excuses for somebody who can't create nothing? I've heard people go off on a whole rendition about their nose. I mean, I beg your pardon, to somebody that can't even create one cell, why would you do that? I mean, it'd be different if they could give you something different. But they can't create anything. Anytime a group of people have to resort to actually using baboon livers to try to stay here, you know that they do not know what they're doing. And we're still actually trying to be accountable to them, even in the face of seeing all the errors that they're making, trying to grope and find them up themselves. And they show us this, and we still are not able to understand that we need to be very, very intuitive and pay very close attention to what we are and know more about ourselves and try to rise to that occasion. And it has to start with the source. I had aspirations to be a lot of things. First of all, a neurosurgeon. I realized that Europeans didn't know much about the brain. And I did not want to continue to maim and harm people because they do a lot of that until just recently. Then I decided I wanted to be an internist. And when they told me that I could not be an internist based on my own skills of being able to take a history and diagnose by what I saw, that all my diagnoses had to be legitimized supposedly by the lab before I could write it down on the chart, I said, no, I didn't want to do that. That's to say that even though I know what's wrong with you, if the blood tests don't come out that way, I can't write it in the chart.